Okay, so it's exactly 2 weeks ago as of recording this that Joe Rogan took time out of being the biggest podcaster in the world to record a comedy special for Netflix to remind us why he's the biggest podcaster in the world. Before we really get started, I'm going to tell you that I saw a video by Elephant Graveyard, which is a channel here on YouTube that is absolutely amazing, full of sarcasm, great editing, everything about that video is perfect. But the first video I saw was from Comedy Enforcement, and Comedy Enforcement is a channel I've been watching for a while. He asked some questions in his video, and that's what inspired me to make this. I've been really busy the last 2 weeks, so it took me a while to get around to it, but I did watch the full special, which is part of what held me up, was that I wanted to see the full special before I actually commented on it, because how are you going to review something that you haven't actually seen?
This is Thai Rivera, the absolute best LGBTQ comedian in the world. I've recently gotten into his work, and I find that he lends a very unique voice to the comedy commentary world and beyond. Not only as an openly gay MAGA hat-wearing comedian, not only as a based Mexican-American, but as a person who speaks from experience on the things he addresses. And as such, as a character in our universe, he is an important figure and bears an important voice.
And I do undeniably know the mechanics of stand-up comedy. So here's what the deal is. Some people online are saying this is a terrible special, and other people are saying it's not that bad. There are far more that are saying that it's terrible than there are the not that bad. But unpopular opinion, I think both of them are correct. Because as far as it being a special goes, it was terrible. But as far as it being just a regular set, it wasn't that bad.
As you can probably tell, Ty's a bit of a spicy boy, and he speaks his mind in plain terms, not giving a damn if he offends so long as he's speaking his truth. Not only do I find this refreshing, but as someone who studies the Rogansphere and beyond, I thought that's exactly what this new right, anti-woke Austin revolution thing was all about.
But I halfway expected that, even though I was hoping that he would prove me wrong, because going to see a Joe Rogan comedy special and expecting him to be good at stand-up makes as much sense to me as going to see Britney Spears and expecting her to be a good singer. Now, I love Britney Spears, but I know she's not a singer, just like some of you may love Joe Rogan, but more than likely, if you know stand-up at all, you know he's not a stand-up comedian.
Thai Rivera moved from LA to Austin in 2022. Before that, he'd been doing comedy since 2008. This makes him a bit of a staple on the scene. He's also been a guest on Kill Tony 3 times since moving to Austin. With such a sterling background, you're probably asking yourself why you haven't heard of him. But I promise we will get to that.
Tickets available at TonyHinchcliffe.com. You guys ready to start tonight's episode or what, huh? You guys are in for such a treat. Our two guests tonight it is both of their first times as guests on the show. Two of my favorite comedians, two people that I've waited a long time to have as guests on this show. Make some noise for the great Ian Fidance and Thai Rivera, everybody! Yeah!
Most comedians in the Rogansphere seem to think they cannot afford to criticize Joe Rogan. I mean, why bite the hand that feeds you, right? But Ty's got too much integrity to just adhere to popular narratives. It's why he speaks out against the current form of activism we're seeing from the new left. It's why he's a great source of insight on how comedy works behind the scenes, and it's why he's the first person for the new right to outwardly cancel, based on him saying things they don't like. Let's keep in mind, most of the new right is old left, and old habits don't die easy.
Actually good at it and elite, and Cat Williams was just looking at him like...
Talked about this the other day. There's maybe 500 of us on the planet. You know, you got to be real generous and say 500 because it's really probably about 250.
Right.
But legit comics,
You think you're a part of that? And everybody watching felt like, yeah, you're not one of those comedians, Joe Rogan. You may have fooled yourself into believing that you're one of those comedians because you've made a lot of money through podcasts. They don't want to lose the opportunity for that money. And in Joe Rogan's case specifically, they don't want to lose access to the mothership. Also, when Comedy Enforcement mentioned that Joe Rogan had started his own thing here in Austin so that cancel culture wouldn't really be a thing.
But also, according to Joe Rogan himself, one of the reasons why he opened his own club and started his own comedy scene in Austin was so that him and other comedians could have a place where they could perform comedy without having to worry about getting canceled or upsetting the club owners and then getting kicked out or losing the gig.
Well, that's not really the way it went down. Joe Rogan and Tony Hinchcliffe wanted to be in charge of cancel culture. That's why when I was vocal about things not working at the club the way that they were supposed to work, which I'll tag that video up here, but when I was open about that, the manager of Mothership immediately got on the phone with the Creek and other clubs in town and let them know that they didn't want me performing at those clubs. So I, in essence, got canceled by Joe Rogan and his club.
Austin, Texas, the hub free from cancellation, ... So long as the powers that be agree with what you're saying. Anyway, this next clip is from the video that got Ty and his friends, quote, canceled in Austin.
Is a lie, even if people don't realize that they're lying. That's the thing that people need to understand about the mothership. Yes, the mothership is a great club if they're being good to you and if they're going to treat you fair. But as far as the mothership being actually necessary to your career, the mothership is not the end all and be all of stand-up comedy. And if you ask me, for as much as Joe and his friends would like to say the mothership is the most like the Comedy Store,
It's just like the Comedy Store.
It
really
is. It is.
Yeah.
even when I was doing the most spots there, I would have told you that is not true. The mothership is very exclusive. Everybody was welcomed in the Comedy Store. So that meant people that were maybe a little bit off. There were some street people that hung out there all the time. Boone Chakalaka, who recently passed away, the late Boone Chakalaka, R.I.P. He used to be there all the time. It was like a real cast of characters at the Comedy Store, and everybody was allowed there. That's actually kind of what gave it its flavor in a lot of ways. And it gave you some stuff to look at that was just like, wow, that was crazy. Mothership is nothing like that. They don't allow any riffraff in the mothership. I do love all the door guys there, get along with all of them really well. I love the staff there. I love security there. I know a few people have said security is a bit much for them, but for me, security's fine. I get along with the security really well. They make me feel really welcomed every time I'm there. But I didn't like the exclusivity of the mothership. So a lot of times I wouldn't hang out at Mitzi's. I would hang out at the mothership until it was time for me to do my set. Sometimes I would hang out in the green room a bit before or after my set. I wasn't one of those people that was just trying to be there. Like, that's the other thing with a lot of the mothership comics. Even some of the ones that I really like, they don't do anything but the mothership. And to me, that is the opposite of what you're supposed to do as a stand-up comedian. You're not supposed to make one club your home and just be there all the time. Yeah, have a home. My home, since I've gotten to Austin, has always been the Creek from the beginning. Yes, I have hung out at the mothership a bit. Yes, I do love Sunset. But when it comes down to it, my home is the Creek. And I'm not saying I didn't love the mothership or couldn't love the mothership again, but as it stands right now, I definitely do not love the mothership in the way that it works. Truth, and not in a good way. All right, so I wanted to talk a little bit about the Comedy Mothership, which is otherwise known as Joe Rogan's Club, because I think that a lot of comedians right now are moving to Austin because they have this picture of what the Comedy Mothership is supposed to be, or what Joe Rogan has said the Comedy Mothership is. And I ended up finding out firsthand that that is not what it is. Don't get me wrong. People have told me not to burn this bridge, and I don't really mind doing it because I've taken every avenue possible to make sure that Joe Rogan himself knows that right now the way that his club is running isn't the way that he pitches it on his podcast, isn't the way other comedians have talked about it. Because when you hear comedians talking about it, it usually is big comedians like Andrew Schultz, Pauly Shore has talked about it, Bobby Lee's talked about it. A lot of people have talked about the Comedy Mothership. And the truth is, that is the perspective from a comedian that the club knows that it has to treat the best because those comedians have Joe's personal blessing, have Joe's number. In a lot of cases, basis, Joe will show up to greet them and make sure that everything goes the way it's supposed to go. What I'm going to talk about is what it's like to be a comedian that actually works for the mothership. And I'm not acting like me and Andrew Schultz should get the same amount of money, but I am saying I end up getting my check, and what they pay per spot at Little Boy is $100, or that's what I only ever got paid, was $100. I mean, like, don't get me wrong, I'm always happy to get money, but when you're hearing online that
he took money from Spotify and is literally distributing it to comics in an insane way.
It's all this money. And even Mark Gagnon, one of his co-hosts on his show Flagrant, who I met when him and Andrew Schultz were here, even he said that he made a lot of money and all he did was the small room.
I only did the little room when I went, and I did like 4 shows there, and I made money on the trip on just doing the little room.
And like I said, it's $100 for that room. And so in my head, I thought, okay, well, maybe the real money comes in when you do the big room, when you do Fat Man. So then I ended up doing a set for Tim Dillon and Giannis Pappas, because Tim Dillon had requested it when he was in town. And I ended up getting that check, and I was paid $200 to do the big room. So Andrew Schultz was talking about how much money you make doing this club.
It's just complete game changer.
But I don't think Andrew Schultz would be dazzled by $200.
Once this pay scale is out there in the world.
But whatever, like I said, me and Andrew Schultz aren't getting the same money. But either way, it definitely was not money like that. It was $200 was what it was. And that's all I've ever been.
Ty wasn't saying anything defamatory. He didn't even insult the club itself in his list of complaints. He simply pointed out that the narrative, the news being pushed around the podcasting world by Joe Rogan and the Unfunny Six, was a false narrative. Fake news, if you will. And I don't know if y'all remember, but the new right hates fake news. Right?
I don't even care if it makes money.
I'm not going to make that seem like the hugest deal in the world, but it is an actual thing when you consider that that's what people are saying. Like, oh, it's so much money. They're giving you so much money. And yeah, maybe to headliners, but a lot of clubs give a lot of money. When other people come in town, if I'm going to do less spots, I do think that's okay. But I know the visitors that we're having come into town, and I'll be honest, the visitors are his friends, and they usually do not do well. Nothing against her, and I know she's been on Joe Rogan Experience, but Kim Congdon.
This mentioning of Kim Congdon's name becomes a huge factor in this saga. If you're interested in this stuff, go check out Thai Rivera's channel, which I'll link in the description. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. I've been working on another script focusing on the drama betwixt Kim Congdon, Sarah Wineshank, and Thai Rivera, which largely kicked off this whole ordeal. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss it.
I don't even want to give him the satisfaction of saying his name because he doesn't even deserve the follows. He could use them, but he's not going to get them. Oh.
To me, the biggest problem at the club is the booker, Adam Egget. I think he was a huge problem at the Comedy Store as well. I don't think Adam Egget knows what he's looking at. I don't think Adam Egget should have a job. I've told him that on text, and I've told him that in person. Because the truth is, I've held this in for 10 years, I think it is, that I've known Adam. Maybe closer to 8 or 9 that I've known Adam. And for anybody that doesn't know what a booker is, a booker pretty much picks the schedules for the comedians. And my thinking that Adam is the problem isn't just because of my personal experience, and specifically the door guys have noticed the amount of favoritism that Adam shows just isn't fair. And there's no way that you're not going to eventually end up in a toxic work environment when you are running so much on your favorites and not really paying attention to the stand-up itself.
First, allow me to break down 2 things. Number 1, Adam Egget is a huge deal. He was the booker at the Comedy Store who took Duncan Trussell's job after Duncan took over for Tommy Morris. Now, pretty much every booker for the Comedy Store has been the subject of a good deal of criticism and controversy. But, given that they are the kingmakers, who decide who gets what slot on stage when, it makes sense. In an industry of bone pickers and shite talkers, Adam holds more power than nearly anyone. Second, Adam used to date Sarah Wineshank of Kill Tony. Now, I personally like Sarah and Kim. They feel like nieces to me who are exactly my age, because I watched them start comedy on Kill Tony, and I'm a sentimental fella like that. But Adam, who seems to have a personal vendetta against Ty, has seemingly gone out of his way to see that the 16-year comedy veteran not only doesn't have a home in the mothership, but in Austin as a whole.
When my spots were. And so there does come a point where it gets like, okay, well, I should probably address this with Adam and find out what's going on. So I first asked Asana Ahmad and Derek Poston in the green room 2 weeks ago now, maybe 3. Hey, if I want to talk to Adam about my spots, what would be the best way for me to go about that? And they both look at me like Adam is their abusive husband and is like, oh, I wouldn't do that. And then Asan is the one that says, I have never seen that go well. And in my head, I'm like, I can't just talk to the booker about...
Whether it's about personal drama, business drama, or both, Ty offended Adam. He offended Kim and Sarah. He offended Rogan. He said things that raised the hackles of the sensitive, which is what I thought they were promoting there. But free speech be damned, they turned around and canceled him. And I'll meet you halfway here. If Adam is the booker, and Ty pissed him off, I suppose, despite it being a less than integral move, it's Adam's right not to book Ty again at his club. But reaching out across the Austin scene, based on things Ty said, to make sure that he cannot work in this town again, is a blatant act of cancellation due to hurt feelings.
Started his own comedy scene in Austin was so that him and other comedians could have a place where they could perform comedy without having to worry about getting canceled or upsetting the club owners and then getting kicked out or losing the gig.
Well, that's not really the way it went down. Joe Rogan and Tony Hinchcliffe wanted to be in charge of cancel culture. That's why when I was vocal about things not working at the club the way that they were supposed to work, which I'll tag that video up here, but when I was open about that, the manager of Mothership immediately got on the phone with the Creek and other clubs in town and let them know that they didn't want me performing at those clubs. So I, in essence, got canceled by Joe Rogan and his club. Also, I have a friend named Leonarda Joni. She actually shared a reel, which was a clip of me talking about the Mothership. So they use that as an excuse to cancel my friend Leonarda, when Leonarda is actually funny. She's got a decent following of her own. Her stand-up comedy is in line with the same kind of thinking as Joe Rogan. There are so many things that make her perfect for that club, but just because she shared something that they considered to be offensive, they went out of their way to basically cancel her. She was immediately banned from the Mothership, which is the antithesis of what Joe Rogan, Tony Hinchcliffe, and many of the others claim to be about. So as far as cancel culture goes, it was not to make sure that cancel culture wasn't an issue for comedians. It was to make sure that they were in charge of cancel culture. And
they even canceled Leonarda, gang. And before you go there, no, Ty doesn't think it has anything to do with his sexuality.
Stand-up comedy, being that this is the biggest stand-up comedy club in the world. I saw quite a few people in my comments saying, oh, you think because you're gay and you're brown that you're supposed to get these spots. This is the dumbest thing ever. If you noticed in the last video, I did not mention anything about the fact that I'm gay or brown being reasons that I should be on shows at the Mothership or get more shows at the Mothership than I had actually gotten. I really do feel like identity politics are what ruined comedy in LA. I was in LA for 14 years. And so when people are like, because I'm a woman, I should get this, or because I'm a person of color, I should get that. I am not that guy even a little bit. And to put it that way would not be fair to me or the club. Because like I said, when it comes to the club, everybody was super cool and everybody was super nice. So when I see comments like, he should have known that the masculinity at Joe Rogan's club, it's like, what are you even talking about? Nobody mentioned those things. And I've got to tell you, to be 100% honest, when it comes to Joe Rogan's club and the security there, you're right. They are those kind of guys. They are super masculine, but they're very secure in their masculinity. And there was no part of me that felt like Joe Rogan or his club is homophobic.
Ty's out here saying things that no other Austin comics with any kind of following have the stones to say. And it's attitudes like that which first drew me to the Rogansphere. But the longer this experiment goes on, the more the Austin scene commits to being Republican shills, and the more sketchy this whole thing gets.
Better, which is what Joe Rogan has said that room's for. But the longer I live in Austin and see the way things work, even from afar, the more I realize that it really was just all designed to stroke Joe Rogan, Tony Hinchcliffe, and a few of their other friends' egos and make it so that they feel like superstars every night, and in a sense get to lie to themselves and pretend that they're actually doing stand-up comedy when they're not really doing stand-up comedy. So they give themselves a lot of credit and a lot of pats on the back like they're really doing stand-up at that club, but it really is the stand-up comedy equivalent of T-ball. That's not necessarily going to provide the best results, because I will give it to you, Joe Rogan and Tony Hinchcliffe are two of the okayest comics in the country, possibly the world. But exactly like I said, with no sarcasm, they are two of the okayest stand-up comedians in the country, possibly the world right now. So if that's who he's bouncing things off of, that's not necessarily going to yield the best special, because neither of them are the best comedians. And some of you will say Tony Hinchcliffe has the most popular live podcast, Kill Tony is amazing, and that's great. But Tony Hinchcliffe is so great at stand-up that he had to create his own genre so he could seem like he was special. That's why he calls himself a roast comedian. Well, spoiler alert, most of us do roast. If you're a good comedian, roasting is a part of your arsenal. But none of us would call ourselves roast comedians, because that's a side to what you do. Stand-up is what you actually do, and if you watch Tony Hinchcliffe's sets, he's not a great stand-up comedian. Some people are gonna say I'm hating, but these are just things that any actual comedian would tell you if they were being completely honest about it and not at all worried about being ostracized from the Austin comedy scene or from Joe Rogan's circle. I personally chose not to be a part of that, so I don't mind saying what I'm gonna say. And
It turns out it really was too good to be true. No one's ego is without fragility. No man, not even he who bears the strength to suffer daily ice baths, bears the wherewithal to be able to withstand a critic in their midst. They got offended, and so they got rid of him. But isn't that exactly the opposite of what they promised everyone? Isn't being canceled for your opinions, jokes, and hot takes exactly what they based this revolution on? Seems to me like more of the same, just with different faces. So far as I can tell, Thai Rivera was the first comedian to be canceled down in Austin. So who's next? And for what offense?